Well, hey, welcome. I am Chris. I'm the pastor at Compass. As always, I am really glad you're with me. So every morning when you get up, there are things that you do to get ready for the day. You take a shower, you put clothes on, you put on deodorant, you do your hair if you have hair. And most of these things are just everyday routines. You do them no matter what. You don't even think about them. But sometimes we do things to get ready based on what a specific day holds. So it's the first day of school, so you might wear nicer clothes. Or you have a work meeting, and so you put on cologne. You're gonna see another human being at some point in the day, so you brush your teeth, which is kind of my thing because honestly, I don't give a rip about oral hygiene. I only brush my teeth because I don't wanna have bad breath and be embarrassed. So do what you want with that. But we do these things because it takes work to be ready for the world. I mean, this is how I want the world to see me. But if I don't get ready, this is what the world gets. It takes preparation to look like this because in my natural state, I look like this. And even on the days we don't have to do anything and we can just exist in our grossest state, we still put clothes on, ideally. But whatever it looks like for you, we all have things that we do in the morning to get ready, even if we don't know exactly what the day is going to hold. And today we're starting a brand new message series called Get Ready because we've come to a place in a dialogue that Jesus had with his disciples where he told them to do just that, to get ready. So we're going to start today in Matthew chapter 24, verse 3. Tell us, they said, when will this happen and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So when the disciples here say the sign of your coming and the end of the age, what they really mean is this. They're saying, Jesus, when are you going to take over and install yourself as the king over Israel? They believed that that was going to be the natural progression, the next step in Jesus' ministry as Messiah, to become the king and to defeat their Roman oppressors, and then to begin this new nation of Israel on their old ancestral land. Some people think the disciples were asking about Jesus' second coming when they asked this question, but that actually would have never crossed their minds because they didn't think Jesus was leaving. They didn't think about a second coming because they didn't think there was a first leaving. But after his resurrection, Jesus did leave. He ascended into heaven. And then this happened in Acts chapter 1, verse 10. It said they were looking intently up into the sky as he was going when suddenly two men dressed in white stood beside them. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven, he'll come back in the same way you've seen him go into heaven. So almost immediately after Jesus left, the disciples were already thinking about and looking for his return. And while they waited, they remembered some things that Jesus said. And they found some clues about what his return would look like from those things that he said. And so let's start here in Matthew 24, verse 36. It says, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. So there's a lot more detail here about all this passage and everything around it. And I would encourage you to go back and check out our previous message series, The End of an Era, to get the full download on that. But here are the basics. Jesus has gone, and the disciples are looking forward to his return. They don't know when it's going to happen. And they need to stay alert so that they're ready when it comes, when it does happen. And it's against this backdrop that we look at the first of 4 stories Jesus tells to illustrate the importance of being ready for it. And so let's begin in Matthew 24, verse 45. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. So Jesus is using a familiar first century storytelling device, the device of a master and his servants. The people would be familiar enough with this to know that in these parables, the master represents God and the servants almost always represent Israel. Jesus tells the story of a head servant who supervises the work and care of all of the other servants in the household while his master's away. The servant doesn't know when the master of the house will return, but he faithfully discharges his duties and responsibilities until that happens. And when the master returns, He found his servant faithfully fulfilling his duties, and as a result, he rewarded him, gave him a promotion. But the story continues, verse 48. But suppose that servant is wicked, and he says to himself, my master's staying away a long time. And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. So now in this version of the story, we have the same servant, but this time, instead of doing his job while the master was away, he lived it up. He took advantage of the fact that his boss was out of town for an indefinite amount of time, and he partied. He partied with the master's stuff, the master's resources, and he abused the other servants that he was responsible for. Let's keep going. Jesus continues in verse 50. The master of that servant, he will come on a day when he does not expect him and at an hour he's not aware of. And he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the master, he returned when his servant least expected it. And seeing the servant abusing his staff and taking advantage of the master's stuff, he cuts him up into little pieces, as one does when you have an underperforming employee. But if this seems like a pretty harsh punishment, it's probably because Jesus is making a rhetorical point about how serious he is about this. And because these are important issues, let's put all the pieces together. No pun intended. So Jesus is telling this story in the context of his soon coming as king. What his followers will soon realize is actually his second coming, when he returns to complete the work of restoration and renewal of all creation that began with his death and resurrection. This return, it will come like a thief in the night, meaning we have no idea when it will happen. I mean, thieves don't email us a calendar invite for when they're going to rob us, and Jesus' return, it will be equally surprising. And finally, when it does, when it happens, some people will be ready and others won't. Those that are will be rewarded, while those that aren't, well, they won't be. And because of this, right from the beginning in the first century church, there was an urgency to their expectation of Jesus' return. They thought it was going to happen in their lifetimes. I mean, they thought it would literally happen any day. We can see this from some of the letters in the New Testament. We can see that they talked about it all the time. Here, let me just give you a few examples of this. Start in 1 Corinthians 1, 7 through 8. Now you have every spiritual gift you need as you eagerly await for the return of our Lord Jesus Christ. He will keep you strong to the end so that you will be free from all blame on the day when our Lord Jesus Christ returns. So that's 1 Corinthians 1, 7 through 8. Here's another, 1 John 2, 28. And now, dear children, continue in him so that when he appears, we may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming. Again, talking about the return of Jesus. Here's Hebrews 9, 27 through 28. Just as people are destined to die once and after that face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. And he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. So these are just three examples of a bunch that are in the New Testament of people talking about Jesus' return, because they talked about it a lot. But they didn't just talk about it. It actually changed how they thought about life. Let me show you here in 1 Peter 1, 3 through 13. It says, in his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope that through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you who through faith are shielded by God's power. Here it is. Until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. Now, we talk about this a lot. Anytime you see the word therefore in the Bible, you need to ask yourself, what is it there for? And look at what came before that therefore and what comes after it so you can understand what's being said. And in his letter here, Peter reminds his audience of Jesus' return at the last time and of the inheritance that's going to come to those who trust in him. And then he says, therefore, while you wait, look forward to it with minds that are sober and alert. So what is this therefore saying? It's saying that because of the second coming of Jesus that we're waiting for, we need to think about life differently. We need to be alert to what God is doing in the world, because it may just be the grand finale when Jesus returns and brings healing, renewal, and restoration to everyone and everything. Because the final renewal of all things starts with a right now renewal. It starts with the renewal of our minds. It starts with a shift in how we think about life. Peter reiterates this again at the end of this same letter with even more urgency in 1 Peter 4:7. He says, "The end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind, so that you may pray." Jesus has returned, and the end of everything as we know it is near. Therefore, be alert and pray. Because Jesus is coming back, the way we think about our life should be different. Our awareness of his return should change how we think about our relationships, our priorities, and our ambitions. Peter wrote this letter thinking Jesus was going to come back like tomorrow, that Jesus' return was near. He had no way of knowing that 2,000 years later that the church would still be waiting. But it doesn't really matter, because for us, whether Jesus returns tomorrow or in 2,000 more years, the expectation of it should still change how we think about and perceive our lives and our world. Jesus is returning to wrap up the project of renewal he began on the cross. Death, sin, and brokenness are going to be completely dismantled when his kingdom is finally and fully established on earth as it is in heaven. We will be reunited with the loved ones that death has separated us from. Our bodies will be resurrected and perfected into the flawless expression of humanity God created us for in the first place. All of creation will be healed and restored into what God always intended it to be, a place where love, creative expression, joy, and purpose are all completely fulfilled in Jesus. And that's what we're waiting for. That's what Jesus wants us to be alert and ready for. And that's what allows us to think differently about life, because we know what we're living for. We don't have to be motivated anymore by success or the fear of death, the need for recognition, or the desire for security. Those things are all temporary. And in comparison to what Jesus will ultimately bring, they're pretty small. But we need to be alert because we don't know when the master is coming home, and we need to be ready when he does. So here's a simple takeaway, something we can do. We can get ready by regularly reflecting on Jesus' return. For the first century church, literally just thinking and talking about the fact Jesus was returning soon was enough to transform how they thought about their lives and how they lived. Just reflecting on the hope of his return, it changed their goals and priorities and ambitions. And we are still that church. In a century-long line of believers, we are still awaiting Jesus' return. And just like that church, we need to live with the urgent expectation and hope in Jesus' return, because when we do, it changes how we think about our lives and our world. It broadens our perspective and it makes us ready. So as we look forward to Jesus' return, may that simple hope, may it cause us to live like Jesus lived, to think like he thought, and to do what he taught. And may the simple renewing of our minds now, as we focus on Jesus' return, may that renewal of how we think change how we think about everything in our world, and may it transform our lives. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.